Hello. I get a little nervous when I'm on camera. I had a few people ask me about my story, and I wanted to make this video so that I can share the link whenever someone asks me, so I don't have to say it over and over again. I also want to encourage you, if you're watching this, to comment and let me know what your story's like, if anything is the same or different, if it's relatable to you. And let me know what you want to see on the channel, because I make different kinds of videos, like Zoom chats and my scripted videos that I write, as well as sharing pointings from other speakers. I could potentially make some meditations, so just let me know what you like to see. So when I was a small child, I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian community in the South, Mississippi Bible Belt. I was a very curious child. I have a few memories of things that I thought were maybe a little strange, perhaps other children didn't go through. Like when I was in kindergarten, I remember staring at the other kids taking a nap on the mat. And I remember thinking, how can they sleep so soundly when they know they're going to die one day? So I don't know how many 5-year-olds contemplate that, but I would look at bugs and wonder why I was a human and not a bug, you know. And I remember wondering, what is this? How did I get here? You know, I would stare at my hand and be like, what in the hell? And I learned about the Bible stories and the Golden Rule, which I still hold above all else. Even though it's a belief system, it still pops up here as a preference to treat others like I want to be treated. It just makes sense to me. And I decided at a very young age that I wanted to be in God's will and be a good girl and make God proud of me. And at about age 10, I started to feel very uncomfortable. And I couldn't put it in words then, but now I can say that it was a subconscious being disturbed by separation. That I was here and others were there and they could see me. And I was very, very, very self-conscious. I began to mask in school and become a chameleon. I would just sort of mimic the people that were the kids that were in front of me and the adults. I believe I'm ADHD and on the autism spectrum, so that played a role, I'm sure. And I felt shame. I felt like I had to be what others wanted me to be, and I couldn't show the weakness that I felt here. The vulnerability, the not okayness with how this seems to be, the separation. So the self-consciousness was very intense at that age, at 10 years old, and it first occurred to me that I wish I was never born. there was a lot of anxiety and depression at that young age. And I didn't feel like I could tell anybody. So I hit puberty. Things seemed to get worse as far as the depression and anxiety, and the masking and the shame. This part gets a little intense. I had a bit of a psychological break at 14 years old. A boy broke my heart, and it affected me from then on. It changed my behavior. I began to have tics. I would hit myself in the head and rock back and forth for hours, saying, I try, and I'm sorry. Would break down, have lots of breakdowns, and I would have vocal tics too, where I would say, shut up, or something like that, talking back to the thoughts. It was much worse than I'm describing here. It was bad. And I told a friend at school, my best friend, a girl my age, and she accused me of trying to get attention, making up the whole story. So I didn't tell anybody. Didn't seek help or anything. I just endured and tried to get through school. So I just went through the motions. I went around to the different groups and cliques and made sure I was socially accepted by everyone. I was a people pleaser. And I didn't really feel like I had my own personality. I felt like my personality wasn't acceptable. It was broken. It was shameful and weak. Actually, I want to go back to a part that I forgot. I figured I would do this, but... So when I was a teenager, I became a very devout Christian. And I would come home from school, read the Bible, and get on my knees and pray. And plead with God over and over and over for wisdom. That's all I wanted. Because I thought that as long as I had wisdom, I would be able to live this life and be in God's will. And I went to church and all that stuff, and I did this every day. Do my homework, read the Bible from front to back, and plead with God for wisdom. And as I did this, I started to see things that didn't make sense to me in the Bible. It was scary because I was starting not to resonate. I was like, wait a minute, there's contradictions that I don't understand here. And one day while I was reading my Bible, it just hit me out of nowhere that this isn't the God that I believe. I don't believe God would do this. The things that are in the Bible that God did. And I don't believe that God would create a whole race of people and condemn it to hell for any reason. And it scared me. I thought that I was losing my faith and I was going to go to hell. So I prayed more. I studied more. Contemplated more. And it wasn't helping. It wasn't resolving anything. The doubt was stronger. It was like water in my hand. I couldn't hold it, my faith. And it came to a point where I didn't believe it anymore. I didn't believe the story of the Bible. I didn't believe God would do that. And it all fell away. And it took some time for it to fall away enough so that I wasn't afraid to go to hell anymore. And that was unique. I felt like I went into Christianity so deeply that I broke the whole system. That it wasn't believable anymore. And that was different from everybody that I knew. Everybody I went to school with, every single member of my family, everybody I knew was fundamentalist Christian. And I was 17 when that happened. And it made me feel like I even more isolated. Because if you tell a fundamentalist Christian that you don't believe, they're going to think you're going to hell and that you are sinful and so on. And I managed to graduate high school. It was a miracle. I decided I was going to start to smoke weed and take a break from school before I attempted to go back to college. And, the weed helped in the moment, but it seemed to, after doing it for years and being a pothead, I started to realize that it wasn't helping. It was just making the anxiety worse. And I did go back to school after a year, and it was difficult. I still had the tics. I would still break down. And I was still had suicidal ideations. Like, it was constant. There was many mornings I would wake up and just immediately start crying because I was awake. I went back to school, and I had the tics, and I was doing them in class, here and there. And I quit because I felt like I couldn't control them. It was humiliating. And I was very sensitive. Like, if I would say hello or wave to somebody on the street and they didn't greet me the way I thought they should, I would ruminate for hours and basically dog myself. And I was very down on myself. I hated myself more than anyone on the planet. I treated everyone as if they were better than me. I put every single person on a pedestal above me. And the suicidal ideations got worse and worse until I really thought that if I was left alone, I would attempt something. And I didn't really want, a part of me didn't want to die, so I called my mom. She came and got me, took me to the hospital, and they admitted me in a psych ward. And they told me that I had some issues and that it wasn't my fault, basically. That I was ill psychologically. And this was the beginning of the sort of healing for me, because I finally accepted that I wasn't weak, I was sick. And that it wasn't my fault. I didn't choose to be this way. So there was a little bit of an acceptance and healing there. But it didn't make the symptoms go away. It didn't make the suicidal ideas and self-loathing go away. So a few years later, I got pregnant with my son. And it was difficult when I found out because I knew that I would never be able to check out. And I grieved for about a month because I knew that I would have to live my life for this child and put on my big girl panties and, you know, live for better or worse. I'm going to shut this door. So I had my baby. He was beautiful and perfect and happy. And I kind of liked having a kid because I didn't get so much attention in public. People would pay attention to the baby, you know. And I would have jobs here and there, but I would sometimes I would walk out because I was overwhelmed, and that would be it. I'd never come back. I was just very sensitive to social cues, and I had social anxiety really bad. It was debilitating. And I ended up being a hermit for many years. I only left to go get groceries if I had to, or whatever I needed. And fast forward, I got a divorce from the father of my son, and I got remarried. And this is when the awakening started, because I felt safe in this new marriage, and I wanted, for the first time, instead of knowing that I would be miserable for every day of my life, and knowing it as if it's some fact, a hope arose here that I could be better somehow. So I started to do research on YouTube on how to heal the psychological self, become healthy. And I got into the law of attraction and heard good things about it from others who struggled like I did. So I was very adamant for a couple months. I would watch my thoughts incessantly. And when a negative or triggering or self-demeaning thought would come up, self-loathing, I would immediately drop it and think of something I was grateful for. And I did this like a freaking hawk. I was hyper-focused on it. And it wasn't long after that I listened to an audiobook called, and I'm pretty sure it was a fictional book. It was, but it was called The Lives of the Masters of the Far East. And it was about all these masters and cities and how they could like walk through fire and all kinds of crazy stuff. But it was written in a way that it was nonfiction. So they anyway, I'm getting off track. So I started to wonder, like, is enlightenment real? And so I started doing research on that, and I immediately decided that it was, and that it was something that I could attain, and that it was something that would solve the problem of me. You know, I could get out of my own way and perhaps be wise and unconditionally loving and healthy above all. and be able to be there fully for my family. Get rid of the self-centeredness, all the things that we want from this enlightenment. So after that, I got into some strange stuff like channeling stuff, Abraham Hicks, law of attraction, channeling, and I felt almost happy for the first time because I was excited. Something was happening. I felt synchronicity. Everything was like serendipitous and weird, like angel numbers and stuff. And I was like, I thought for the first time in my life that I didn't regret any of it, any of the suffering that I had endured before. That it all led to this. And that this is beautiful and a miracle and a gift, this life. And the belief that I wasn't capable of happiness fell away. I started to have so much hope that I could be happy and well. And the law of attraction sort of phase really helped me, begin to inquire into thoughts. And then I listened to an Eckhart Tolle book, and I had what I like to call initial awakening. I was very present for about a day and a half. It was a bit strange. It was just pure presence. And I guess you could say the self fell. And then the thought came, but who will live my life? And it all flooded back in. The doer, the thinker. And almost immediately I thought, wow, I have to get back to that. I was awake and now I'm not. And that's when the earnest, obsessive seeking began. And I went through teacher after teacher after teacher. I would absorb the information from one and move to the next constantly. I found radical non-duality, and entered into a negation period, sort of nihilism period, where I was trying to conceptually force the belief that there's no one here and there's only this onto myself. And I was basically gaslighting myself because every time a trigger would come up, I would say, well, who is there to feel that or think that? And I was suppressing the triggers. I was averting them. And this period lasted quite a while, this attempt to negate what's arising conceptually as a belief system. And it turned into this meing and being, where I would have these times of expansion and calm and somewhat equanimous. And something would happen involving people, usually, and I would be triggered. And I would spiral into a months-long, anxious depression or longer. And then there would be the expansion again. So it was just like back and forth, like waves. And I noticed this happened over 4.5, 5 years or so. This spiritual bypassing is what it is. It's trying to go around emotions to get to some imagined finish line. Because we think that awakening is the end of emotions that we don't prefer. But it's not. You know, the sensations and emotions are a portal. They have to be gone into deeply, in my humble opinion, at least for me. Not avoided. So yeah, I had heard of spiritual bypassing on the path, and it was funny because I thought, oh, those poor people, you know, I would never do that, and I was doing it. That's how unconscious I was during that time. And then I found Angelo DeLulo, and I was ready to hear what he had to say. And he talks about spiritual bypassing. And it was like a light bulb went off, and I realized, oh, that's what I've been doing for years. I had been avoiding feeling deeply, actually feeling for the first time. And that opened up a whole new world for me. All I knew was the world of dissociation and delusion and imagining something better. Which was a step up from imagining how worthless I was, but you know. So I tried to go into the body consciously. I tried to put awareness there as much as I could. I would do that, and I would listen, you know, as a meditation. I would stare at objects for a long time, you know, in inquiry, asking, what is this? You know, not necessarily the object, but reality itself. What is this? And it was frustrating at first because I noticed the awareness. It kind of does what it wants. You know, you're like, okay, I'll put awareness on the body, and before you know it, you're in mind again. It would just happen over and over and over. And I learned so much by deliberately, whenever I was conscious enough, going to direct experience as opposed to dissociating. So much I learned. I learned that, you know, without an image of the body and the mind, sensations don't have a boundary. They seem to go outside of you. I learned that dissociation happens when it does. There's nothing there to control it. You know, change happens when it does. And I became very present with the thoughts. You know, some people call it the witness state. But I also did a lot of meditation on the path. I forgot to mention that, but I got pretty good at samadhi and, you know, go into those deeper places of the mind, you know, theta, gamma, those brainwave states. But there comes a point where you can see the thoughts they're so distant, and And they're so automatic. They're just going, just like your heart beats or your lungs breathe or any other natural phenomenon. It just becomes very obvious that, oh, I'm not thinking my thoughts. In fact, I am a thought. I am is a thought. And we know we're not a thought. So we intuit what we are by seeing what we're not. And this is all just aliveness playing before our eyes. There's no doer, controller, claimer even. It's seen that there's no one to identify or not identify already. Time is psychological. Words and language and concepts are empty of meaning inherently, which is the freest thing ever, you know. A world where words actually mean something is a hellscape. At least it was for me. And there's a simple, obvious aliveness that appears when interest falls in thoughts. And thoughts are seen for what they are: ephemeral, fleeting symbols, a survival mechanism. Yeah, it was seen that everything is natural and impersonal. Everything. There's no one to blame. And all there is innocence. And anything can still arise. This is nothing like I thought it would be. Triggers can still pop up. Personing can still pop up. Beliefs can still pop up. But they're much different. The flavor of them. They're much, much lighter. And this insight of no self is always there. The emptiness is always there. And the emptiness makes way for the fullness. I feel like I can be a human for the first time. I can finally live. This is grace and futility. This is flow without one who is in flow. And there feels like a coming home, coming full circle back to this ordinary humanness. But it's seen to be beautifully innocent, all of it, all the appearances, already allowed. No one has to allow it. Just look. Everything is already allowed. So it occurred to me that some of you might be wondering how my symptoms are now after the seeing of no self and the integration that happens after, the deepening, the entering of the fullness into the emptiness and the union of the two. My symptoms are much, much lighter. Even after I applied the principles of law of attraction, they became lighter. Um, the disturbing thoughts can still arise. The intense sensations can still arise. Sorry, I'm hearing sounds in my house. They can still arise, but they're different. They are impersonal now. It's seen that no one's doing it, but there's no claiming of it. It's the grace of futility, the seeing of the innocence of this being. And when something arises, it's seen to already be, you know, and seeing that nothing can be done about what's arising makes it lighter. It's lighter when it's choiceless. And of course it was always choiceless. It was always this way. Empty. But when you see the emptiness, when it's recognized by no one, like a apple falls from a tree, it's seen that there's already an allowance here for the aliveness, for the fullness, for this chaotic, energetic appearance to express impersonally. Thoughts are usually in the background and no big deal. And there can be sticky thoughts from time to time, but they're seen pretty quickly to be what they are, just thoughts. And I'm distracted by the sounds from my house. I don't know if you can hear it. And the emotions are different because there's no anticipation of them. There's no anticipation of the triggers. When they arise, they come out of nowhere spontaneously. And they're very intense and full on. It's like if you're frustrated, you just completely become the frustration. And it's like an open water hose, the water goes through quickly with no kinks in it. It feels like it can be fully felt because there's no resistance like before. And when it's over, it's as if it never happened. It doesn't linger. It's like a wild animal, you know, reacting spontaneously, effortlessly, without the energetic belief that it could be other than this. So please share what you think and if you relate, and let me know if you like more videos like this where I'm talking on camera. And thank you all so much for your support and love. I love you.